So here with Christian Bannan from Southeast Soil and Water. I'm Reuben Wells from AgLogic. We've organised for Christian to come down with a bit of assistance from the TAS Farm Innovation Hub with an aim to look at how we can manage our soils under increasingly intense irrigated agriculture, which is what we've got going on in our Midlands area. We've had a great couple of days looking at a bunch of different soil pits, and I think we picked up a few really useful lessons that Tassie growers can take on. Christian, could you give us a little bit of your thoughts on what you've seen, particularly around that subsoil moisture management and how that can increase or decrease our root zone if it's done better or worse?
Yep. Thanks, Reuben. So over the last 2 days between Bothwell and Campbelltown, we've been through a number of soil pits, and the common theme we have here is that we've got growers that are running quite intensive rotations, varying crops. Some of them are pastures, and then moving out into different annual crops. But the common thing we're seeing in all of these sites is in some fairly heavy subsoils. And with the rainfall we have and the environment we have, you add irrigation water to these, and quite often the subsoils are becoming wet, and they're staying wet for a long period of time. This constant wetting does not allow us to maintain or improve soil structure. If anything, soil structure declines over time. And in clays, particularly where we have some really blocky aggregates that shrink and swell, and where topsoil can move down and along with nutrient and organic matter, that fails to happen where the soils are wet and stay wet for a long period of time. So one of the key messages to all the growers is that at some stage in a cropping rotation, the soils need to have their moisture levels drawn down, and not necessarily dried out, but for a clay to maintain structure, it has to shrink and crack and have material move down those cracks. And as we've seen in some of the longer pastures that we've looked at Bothwell and here at Campbelltown, sure enough, where we've been able to have something growing all year round, we can see root systems, or roots down to, right down to the base of the pit in a lot of instances, beyond a metre, as opposed to where we're looking at sites that have been intensively cropped, they've been watered, those crops are finished with residual moisture. We've had winter rainfall as well, and we're seeing really wet, not saturated but near saturated subsoils with shallower root systems. So that certainly led to us believing that with that lack of root zone depth, we're really going to struggle to achieve optimal yield potential. With wet soils going into a cropping phase, there's no buffer. There's nowhere for, there's no space for us to take in any soil moisture, and as a result, we can become real wet real quick. So that's that's the main take home from the last few days.
Yeah, and one of our observations, having done a lot of soil moisture monitoring around the state in a lot of these crops, is that when we do get that, particularly when we're sowing into a wet or a dry subsoil, it's really a case of just luck of the preceding season. And so one of the messages I was picking up was the idea of possibly really intentionally doing a dry down phase before a high value crop, instead of just hoping for the best and taking what we get, that there might be some real benefits in actively manipulating that subsoil moisture before we put our big money earner crops in, and we're going to get a better bang for that crop, and then we're also going to have less subsoil damage coming out of that big crop.
Yeah, and that's been one of the key messages, is that although it might sound a little bit crazy, we need to take some risks on irrigation and not just put water on because we think it will lead to more yield or a better soil or some better outcome is that plants grow in moist soil. They don't grow real well in saturated soils, and as soon as that soil starts to become quite wet, the root zone depth reduces. The plants are keeping their roots up shallow because that's the zone that wets and drains, yes, we certainly need to look at opportunities both within our rotation and within our crops to take some risks on soil moisture and not just go and put on more irrigation because we can.
The other key message that I was hearing from you was that we've got more opportunity doing an opening up of our clays by drying them down than we have by trying to cultivate ourselves out of a problem, and by ripping some of those subsoils we can get a gain, but we're only going to get a benefit if we've got good organic matter at the top that is going to then follow that crack that we open up down, and also that we're doing it when we've already created that dry subsoil, that there's no point dragging our ripper through a soupy paste of clay. We need it to be dry, so it's going to shatter and crack, and then we're going to get the other benefits that we look for from mixing up those topsoils with the subsoils.
Yeah, the main message with our clays is not to intentionally go and rip clays unnecessarily. They should maintain their own structure simply by allowing them to dry down. There's a lot of ripping into clays, particularly where growers are, say, growing potatoes for argument's sakes, and they're going through about their land preparation. They're just naturally ripping into clay soils or zones where we've got shallow topsoils. But our ripping responsive soils are those that are duplex, and that where we can actually rip through a pan as such. And if we don't necessarily have a hard pan, the question is, do we need to rip? But our primary response from ripping comes from when we've got the movement of organic matter, nutrients, topsoil, lime, whatever we've got mixed in our topsoil is behind that tine. We don't necessarily see a big gain from ripping clays, and nor should we be out there to do that. But in our duplex soils, there are opportunities to rip soils and rip them well, and see a productive gain.
But only if they're dry or fairly dry, and if we are thinking fairly carefully about the depth of operation. I think that was the other thing that I was learning from you, was that you don't necessarily stick the thing in as deep as you can. That's right. And that's not going to give you, going deeper is not going to give you a better job. The aim is to rip to just below your constraining layer, and that can increase over time, but don't go all the way in the first year.
Yes. Yeah, and look, I guess the other take-home message is that everyone comes up with their idea on what's wrong with the soil, and it's really important to have a look at the profile. Without looking at the profile, we don't really know what we've got. This one here that we're sitting on, we've got topsoil depth that's as shallow as sort of 10 to 12 centimetres in one spot, and then it pushes out into a deep bleach day 2 horizon that's nearly 30 centimetres deep in another part. What we will see in different seasons is growth that varies proportional to depth of topsoil, and in some of these hollows, we're holding water, and by holding water in dry conditions, they're probably going to perform better, and in wet conditions, they're probably going to suffer and not perform as well. So it's important to have a look at the soils. It'd be great to have land that has uniform soil types under pivots, but we don't necessarily have that. And once we understand what we've got, we can make better decisions on how to manage it, both from a land preparation perspective and managing machinery, but as a result of the field days we've carried out, there's big opportunities here to manage irrigation better.
Cool.
Done.
Thanks, mate. It's great to have you over here.